He instructed the aide to accompany the queens to the riverside where the village midwife lived, with a strict and heartless order. Any baby girls born must be thrown into the river. I've had enough of daughters. Only a son is to be brought back home. Once upon a time, in the heart of the vast and vibrant continent of Africa, there was a breathtakingly beautiful kingdom named Idu. This kingdom was not just known for its lush forests and sparkling rivers, but also for its incredible king, Echezona. King Echezona wasn't just any king, he was a legend. His name was whispered across distant lands, far and beyond the mountains and rivers, because he was incredibly wealthy and wise beyond measure. Everyone in the kingdom looked up to him, not just because he sat on a golden throne, but because he truly cared for his people and made their lives better every single day. Under his rule, the kingdom of Idu blossomed like a garden in spring. It was a time of joy and prosperity, and the people adored their king with all their hearts. King Echezona was truly a king after his people's hearts. He made sure everyone had enough to eat, the children had schools to go to, and the sick were well taken care of. The streets were safe, the farms were fertile, and laughter was heard from every home. Because of his deep love and effective leadership, he was cherished like no other king before him. However, despite all the love and respect he garnered, King Echezona carried a heavy heart. The one thing that troubled him day and night was that he had no son to inherit his throne. This worry gave him sleepless nights, tossing and turning as he pondered over his legacy. He had hoped that one of his queens would give him a male heir, so he married many women, one after the other, hoping that this would solve the problem. But fate had a different plan. King Echezona had 16 wives, and each time they had a child, it was a daughter. Each of his daughters was as bright and beautiful as the dawn, but the king's heart yearned for a son to continue his lineage. As the years went by, King Echezona's patience began to wear thin. He grew more anxious and restless with each passing day because he was not getting any younger. And the question of who would succeed him became more pressing. His deep worry cast a shadow over his once bright and joyful heart as he wondered what the future held for his beloved kingdom of Idu. This great king, adored by his people and blessed with so much, found himself caught in a storm of worry and impatience, struggling with a problem that seemed to have no solution. In the magnificent palace of King Echezona, among all his wives, there was one named Norma, the king's fifth wife. She was so stunningly beautiful that her beauty caused whispers of envy to rustle through the palace like a gentle wind. But Norma was not just a pretty face. She was also kind-hearted and a marvelous cook, skills that made her meals a feast for the senses. It was these qualities, her kindness, and her culinary talents that endeared her even more to the king. Norma quickly became the king's favorite, a fact that didn't sit well with the other wives. This favoritism sparked jealousy among them, and it wasn't long before they started picking on Norma, trying to provoke her into making a mistake so they could gang up against her and punish her. But Norma was not just beautiful and kind, she was also wise. She never engaged in fights or raised her voice in anger. Even when the other wives tried their hardest to disturb her peace, she remained calm and composed, always walking alone with dignity and grace. Eventually, most of the wives grew tired of their unsuccessful attempts to provoke her and left her alone. However, Mba, the king's second wife, was different. Her heart was filled with a fierce and burning hatred for Norma. She refused to let go of her envy and continued to scheme against her. Mba's mind was constantly spinning, searching for the perfect plan to bring Norma down. And one day, a sinister idea struck her. King Echezona had made it very clear to all his wives and everyone in the kingdom that he detested stealing. He had decreed that anyone caught in the act would face severe punishment. They would be banished to the most desolate part of the village, a place where refuse and dirt piled up, a place of disgrace and honor. Everyone in the palace knew the king was serious and that he always stood by his words. In the royal palace, the women took turns to cook for the king. Each wife had her day to showcase her culinary skills in the hopes of pleasing the king. Mba, the king's second wife, had a plan that was as devious as it was well organized. She knew that if she was going to bring down Norma, the king's favorite, she needed a flawless scheme. One evening, she got the perfect opportunity. It was her turn to serve the king his dinner, which also gave her the rare chance to enter his private bedroom. That night, she was also chosen to share the king's bed, a privilege that rotated among the wives. As the palace slept soundly under the blankets of the night, Mba quietly slipped out of the royal bed where King Echezona lay sleeping. Her heart pounded with excitement and malice as she reached for the king's most prized possession, a magnificent golden chain that he cherished above all his treasures. With a sly smile, Mba carefully took the golden chain, her mind racing with the thought of how this act was going to frame Norma. Mba knew that Norma, being the king's favorite, spent a lot of time with him, more so than any other wife. This made her the perfect suspect in any misdeed close to the king. 2 days passed, and as Mba had anticipated, the king noticed that his beloved golden chain was missing. His fury was like a storm, sweeping through the palace. Stealing was an act he loathed deeply, and he had always made his strict stance on it very clear to everyone in the kingdom. In his rage, King Echezona summoned the palace maids and guards, demanding answers, but nobody had any idea about how the precious chain could have disappeared from such a secure and sacred place as the king's room. With no thief apparent, the king's suspicion turned to his own wives. One by one, they all denied their involvement. It was then that Mba, feigning concern, suggested a thorough search of everyone's belongings. "My king," she said, clearing her throat to draw attention, "perhaps we should search all the clothes boxes and rooms. It could be that the thief is closer than we think. In fact, it could even be one of us." The other wives, completely unaware of Mgba's evil plan, agreed and nodded in support of her suggestion. They trusted Mgba's words, not knowing the treachery that lay behind them. Meanwhile, unknown to Nneoma, while she was out working on the farm, Mgba had cunningly slipped the golden chain into her box. This act was a way to ruin Nneoma and possibly have her banished from the palace. As the searches began, Nneoma remained blissfully unaware of the storm that was about to hit her life. The search throughout the palace was a long and tedious affair. King Echezona had specifically instructed that Nneoma, his most beloved wife, be the last to undergo the search. He couldn't bear the thought of her being involved in such treachery, and this delay was his way of protecting her. One by one, the rooms of all the other wives were searched meticulously, but they found nothing out of the ordinary. Finally, the moment came for Nneoma's quarters to be searched. She welcomed the guards with open arms, confident in her innocence and unaware of the plot against her. She watched calmly as they rummaged through her belongings, but her calmness soon turned to confusion and then to horror. The king's guard emerged from her room, holding the missing golden chain. The room felt silent, and then filled with gasp and shock from everyone present. The king's face turned dark with fury. "You ungrateful fool," King Echezona thundered at Nneoma, his voice echoing off the palace. "I have showered you with nothing but love and kindness, and this is how you repay me? Have you ever asked for anything that I haven't given you? You are a disgrace, and I never want to set my eyes on you again." Nneoma, tears streaming down her face, fell to her knees. She desperately tried to explain, to tell the king she was innocent, that she had no idea how the chain ended up in her room. But the king was too engulfed in his anger to listen to any of her pleas. He stormed off to his chambers, leaving her alone with her sorrow. As the guards dragged her out of the palace, Nneoma continued to cry, pleading her innocence, but her cries fell on deaf ears. No one believed her. The evidence was too glaring. "How the mighty have fallen," sneered the other wives, barely concealing their delight. Inside, they were thrilled at the prospect of having the king's attention now that Nneoma was out of the picture. Meanwhile, Mgba was unable to contain her joy. She was elated that her wicked plan had worked perfectly. With Nneoma banished from the palace, Mgba felt triumphant, reveling in the success of her plot and the downfall of the king's favorite wife. She watched with a satisfied grin as Nneoma was led away, knowing she had rid herself of her greatest rival. Nneoma was sent far away from the palace and banished to a desolate part of the forest known as the slums. Here, she lived amidst the wilderness, surrounded by nothing but the whispering trees and the distant cries of wild animals. Her new home was a stark contrast to the grandeur of the palace. Every day she wept, her tears mingling with the dirt beneath her feet, as she grappled with the pain of her unjust fate. Deep in her heart, Norma felt certain that someone had framed her up. Clinging to her fate, she prayed fervently every day, hoping that somehow she would be proven innocent. As the years slowly ticked by, back in the kingdom, King Echizuna's problem remained unsolved. He was growing older, and the absence of a male heir weighed heavily on him. Simply marrying more wives had not solved his dilemma, and he knew he needed a real solution. Determined to resolve his predicament, King Echezuna embarked on a lengthy journey to seek help from a renowned herbalist named Ogugo, who lived in the town of Oduma. Ogugo was famous far and wide, not just for his knowledge of herbs, but for his deep connection with the spiritual world. When the king met with Ogugo, he poured out his heart, sharing his troubles about not having a son, despite having 16 wives. Moved by the king's plight, the herbalist promised to help him. He began intense consultations with the gods, seeking their wisdom on the matter. The wait was agonizing for the king, each moment stretching longer than the last. Finally, the herbalist Ogugo came forth with a message from the gods. He revealed a shocking truth to the king. His father, the king, had been a cruel man who mistreated the poor, seized their lands, destroyed their crops, and forcibly took any woman he desired from her husband. The people, wronged by his father, had cursed his lineage in tears, decreeing that no male child would be born into his family. And the gods had honored their words. The solution was daunting but clear. The king must return all that his father had wrongfully taken and seek forgiveness from all the families his father the king had hurt. Only then would the curse be lifted. After making amends, he was also to return to Ogugo for further instructions on resolving his issue with having an heir. With a heavy heart, but a glimmer of hope, King Echezuna thanked the herbalist and set off to his kingdom. He felt a mixture of relief and determination, grateful to finally have a path forward, and resolved to do whatever it took to right the wrongs of his father and to restore his family's honor. When the king Echezuna returned to the palace, he wasted no time in gathering all the elders of the kingdom. He shared with them the revelations and instructions he had received from the wise herbalist Ogugo. Determined to correct the wrongs of the past, the king and the elders sprang into action. They began the painstaking process of returning every single thing that had been unjustly taken by the king's father. King Echezuna also personally apologized to all the families who had been wronged, expressing his sincere regrets for the actions of his father. Once all was set right, King Echezuna made the journey back to the town of Oduma to see the herbalist Ogugo. The herbalist welcomed him, being so happy that he had done as he was instructed. He handed him a large head of palm fruit, a traditional fruit known for its hard shell and juicy seeds. Ogugo explained, "Take this palm fruit back to your palace. Share it amongst your wives. They should boil it and eat the fruit. They will all become pregnant, but only one of these palm fruits holds the seed that will yield a male child. The wife who eats from that particular fruit will be the one to give you a son." Filled with new hope and excitement, King Echezona hurried back to his palace. As soon as he arrived, he gathered all his wives together except for Nneoma, who had been sadly banished to the slums. He presented the first wife with the big head of palm fruit and instructed her to divide it among the wives. Each wife was to prepare and eat the fruit in hopes that she would bear the long-awaited male heir. The king watched eagerly, hoping that this ancient wisdom would finally bless him with a son to carry on his legacy. As King Echezona's first wife, Uju, carefully tied her share of the palm fruits in her wrapper, she noticed that one seemed spoiled. Wrinkling her nose in disapproval, she decided to dispose of it outside. High up in the branches of a nearby tree, a curious squirrel was watching Uju's every move. The moment she walked away, the squirrel scampered down the tree, eager to inspect the discarded item. With a flick of its bushy tail, it grabbed the palm fruit and darted off, happy to have found a treat. The squirrel made its way towards the outskirts of the village, hopping and skipping along. It lived in the slums, where life was tougher and food was scarcer, hoping to share the fruits with his family. In the slums, a group of playful children spotted the squirrel. They immediately began to chase it, laughing and shouting as they ran. Startled by the commotion, the squirrel accidentally dropped the palm fruit right in front of Nneoma's shabby compound. It quickly scampered away to escape the boisterous group. Nneoma, who had been sitting outside, noticed the palm fruit. Her eyes lit up. Palm fruits were one of her favorite treats. She picked it up, examined it, and finding it perfectly good, except for some rotten parts, decided to roast it. Once it was nicely charred, she sat down and savored every bite of the warm, juicy fruit. Weeks passed, and soon news came to the king that all his wives were expecting. The king was overjoyed, filled with anticipation for the heir he had long hoped for. He couldn't wait to meet his new child, confident that one of his wives would surely give birth to a son. After 9 long months, the time came for the queens to deliver their babies. King Echezona, desperate for a male child and fed up with daughters, gave a stern command to his special aides. He instructed the aide to accompany the queens to the riverside where the village midwife lived, with a strict and heartless order. Any baby girls born must be thrown into the river. I've had enough of daughters. Only a son is to be brought back home. The aide reluctantly followed these cruel orders, As the queens gave birth, each one had a daughter, and each time the aide carried out the grim task assigned to him by the king. However, he was shocked to see Norma, as no one knew she was pregnant. When it was her turn, she gave birth to a healthy baby boy. It happened that the half-spoiled seed Uju had thrown away was the seed that held the king's heir. The aide was shocked and furious. Norma, the banished queen, had given birth to the long-awaited male heir. Overcome by jealousy and anger, and possibly fearing the king's wrath for allowing Norma give birth with the queens, he made a horrific decision. Ignoring the miracle of her birth, he threw both mother and child into the river, hoping to erase the evidence of Norma's triumph. As the river's currents swiftly carried Norma and her new baby, she clung to her child with all her strength. The cold water surged around them, pushing them further away from her old life and towards an unknown destiny. Norma's arms wrapped tightly around her baby, her heart pounding with fear as she felt her energy fading with each passing moment. In the Moth Kingdom, a place where the river gently widened and the waters calmed, an old woman named Chinne was washing ukwa seed along the river bank. Ukwa, a local delicacy, was often gathered and prepared by the villagers. As she scrubbed the seed, Chinne noticed something unusual floating in the water. Squinting her eyes against the sunlight, she realized with shock that it was a woman and her child being swept by the current. Alarmed, Chinne screamed for help, her voice echoing along the river. "Help! There's someone in the river!" Her urgent cries caught the attention of people nearby, and soon a group of young men rushed to the river bank. The men, skilled in swimming and rescue, plunged into the water without hesitation. Working together, they reached Norma and her baby, pulling them from the river's relentless grip. They carried them to the shore, where Chinne, known throughout the kingdom for her knowledge of healing herbs, immediately took charge. Chinne, with a kind and determined spirit, led the way to her home, guiding the young men as they helped carry Norma and her child. Once inside, Chinne quickly prepared herbal concoctions, known for their healing properties. She gently administered the herbal remedies to both mother and child, watching over them with a watchful eye. Over the next few days, Norma and her baby slowly regained their strength under Chinne's careful supervision. The warmth of the old woman's home and the potency of her herbs worked wonders. Day by day, Norma felt her strength returning, and her baby thrived, nourished by both Chinne's remedies and the safety of her care. In this unexpected sanctuary, Norma and her child began to heal from their harrowing ordeal, surrounded by the kindness and expertise of Chinne, the healer of the Moth Kingdom. After Norma had fully recovered her strength and spirit, she opened her heart to Chinne, the kind old woman who had rescued her. Sitting in the warm cozy room, Norma began to share the painful story of her life at the palace and how she had been cruelly driven out. As she recounted the events, tears streamed down her cheeks, each one a reminder of the injustice she had faced. Chinne listened intently, her heart aching for the young woman before her. She offered words of comfort, trying to soothe Norma's wounded spirit. Amidst her sobs, Norma expressed a deep fear. "I need to go back to the kingdom, but I can't return with my child. I'm terrified of what people will say. It's been so long since I left the palace, and I've been with no man. I don't understand how I got pregnant. And if the king finds out, he may kill me." Chinne, who was not only a skilled healer, but also a blessed seer, smiled gently at Norma. "Cry not," she said softly, her voice filled with warmth and reassurance. "This child of yours is a rightful heir to the throne. He belongs to the king." She then shared her insights about the palm kernel and explained how Norma had unwittingly eaten the blessed seed that was meant to produce the heir to the throne. As Chinne spoke, memories flooded back to Norma. The day she found the palm fruit in front of her humble hut, and how she had savored it not knowing its significance. Realization dawned on her, and a mix of excitement and fear filled her heart. She pleaded with Chinne, "Please, can you help me keep my son safe? I'm scared of losing him, and I'm not even brave enough to face the king." Chinne, with her immense kindness, agreed to take care of the little prince. They named him Aguna, which means the king's strength, symbolizing the hope and resilience he represented. Norma, grateful for Chinne's generosity, promised to visit her son as often as she could, maintaining a bond despite her fears. Meanwhile, in the palace, King Echezona faced a profound despair. He had learned that none of his wives had given birth to a son. Convinced that the gods were punishing him for the sins of his father, he lived each day in sorrow, burdened by the fear of losing his throne and his legacy. Little did he know his heir, a baby boy named Aguna, was alive and well, being raised by the wise and loving Chinne just beyond the reach of the palace walls. Every now and then, Norma would quietly visit the village to see her son Aguna, ensuring he was growing up well. Over the years, Aguna blossomed into a strikingly handsome young man, tall, fair, and with a charm that no one in the village could ignore. His physical strength was unmatched, making him a hero in the eyes of many and an enviable figure among his peers. This envy deepened as Aguna continued to outshine all the young men in the village with his feats of strength and good deeds. He never liked seeing anyone oppressed and was willing to defend the weak any day and any time. One day, as Aguna was walking back from the farm, he stumbled upon a scene of violence. A young man named Opaka was furiously beating another man who owed him money and was unable to pay it back. "Give me my money now, or I kill you," he screamed as he hit the young man mercilessly. Aguna, ever the peacemaker, rushed to break up the fight. But Opaka, blinded by his anger, refused to stop. Frustrated and provoked, Aguna stepped in and managed to subdue Opaka. It was then that Opaka, fueled by his long-standing jealousy, hurled the cruelest insults at Aguna. "Look at you, parading around the village like you're some kind of god. You bastard child, Where's your mother? Where is your father? Just a child picked from the water, now trying to lord over everyone in the village. Aguna was stunned. These harsh words cut deep, and for the first time he questioned his own origins. He had always thought he was from that village and Chinne was his mother. With a heavy heart, he rushed home to confront Chinne, needing to know the truth about his identity. Chinne, with a sorrowful look, revealed everything. She told him that the occasional visitor, Norma, was his real mother, and that he was indeed a prince. She explained how his mother was unjustly accused and banished from the palace, and how they were both thrown into the river right after his birth. It was out of fear for his safety that his mother had left him in Chinne's care. Though the truth was painful, Aguna felt a wave of relief, knowing his life had been shaped by acts of protection, not abandonment. He understood now why the young men of the village bore resentment towards him, as rumors of his mysterious past had spread. Despite the hostility, Aguna found solace in music. Each day, after toiling in the fields under the hot sun, he would sit under the shade of a tree and sing songs about his life history. These songs were his ways of coping, of expressing all the complex emotions he felt about his birth and his heritage. Unknown to him, a wine tapper from the Idu kingdom, who often traveled far and wide for his trade, frequently came to tap wine near Chinne's farm. One day, curious about the haunting melodies he heard so often, the wine tapper decided to listen intently to Aguna's song. As he absorbed the lyrics, he was shocked by the implications of the young man's words. Realizing the potential significance of his discovery, the wine tapper approached Aguna. He asked him where he was from, and Aguna, unsuspecting of the wine tapper's intentions, simply said he was from Idu. This baffled the wine tapper. Could he be the son of the king? As he knew the king had no son. Not speaking any further, he went back to the kingdom. Upon his return, he relayed his discovery to the king, sparking a chain of events that could change Aguna's life forever. The king was stunned by the wine tapper's unexpected news. He had never heard that any of his wives had given birth to a male child, so the news came as a shock. Eager to see the truth for himself, he made plans to accompany the wine tapper the very next day. Early in the morning, the two set out for Chinne's farm. Upon arriving, they concealed themselves behind some thick bushes near the fields, peering out. The king saw a young man walking diligently. He was struck by the young man's handsome features and the remarkable strength he had displayed as he walked the land. The king's heart filled with hope, silently wishing that this impressive young man could indeed be his long-lost son. As the sun climbed high into the sky, the young man took a break under the shade of a large tree and began to sing. The wine tapper nudged the king, signaling him to listen closely. The song was poignant, hinting at a tragic story of a child thrown into the river at birth. The king's heart sank as he remembered the harsh order he had given years ago. Overwhelmed by emotion, he stepped out from hiding and approached his son, embracing him tightly. Tears streamed down his face as he confessed, "I have lived all my life in pain, not knowing I had a son somewhere." With Chinne's blessing, The king decided to bring the young prince back to the village to identify his mother. He declared that the woman the prince chose would become the queen, sitting beside him on the throne for the rest of his days, enjoying the luxuries the palace had to offer. Word quickly spread among the queens in the palace. They prepared lavish dishes and dressed in their most beautiful garments, each hoping to be chosen by the prince. On the appointed day, they lined up, radiating beauty and anticipation. However, to everyone's surprise, the prince did not choose any of them. Instead, he announced that his mother was not among the lineup and led the crowd to the slums where she lived. There, in front of a humble hut, sat Noma. As Agunna approached and embraced her, the villagers watched in stunned silence. Noma unable to grasp the unfolding events. It was then that Chinne stepped forward and explained everything. She recounted the tale of the palm kernel and how Noma had been falsely accused by Mba, who had planted the stolen golden chain in Noma's box. The king's fury was immediate. He summoned his aide and Mba, and without delay, banished them from the kingdom for their deceit and treachery. With a heavy heart, the king went on his knees and apologized to Noma for all the suffering he had caused her. It seemed the gods had chosen her to bear the heir to the throne, despite the hardships she had endured. Noma, moved by the king's remorse and her love for him, forgave him. With joyous music filling the air, she was escorted back to the palace alongside her son, the rightful heir to the throne. It was a day of unparalleled happiness for the king and a cause for celebration among the villagers. For her wisdom and kindness, Chinne was handsomely rewarded by the king, and from that day on, they all lived happily ever after, their lives intertwined by faith and forgiveness. The moral lesson of this story is that truth and justice will always prevail, no matter how long it takes. Despite the hardships and misunderstandings, integrity and honesty ultimately lead to redemption and forgiveness. It teaches us the importance of being patient and maintaining our innocence and virtue, even when faced with false accusations or difficulties. This story also highlights the power of forgiveness and the strength it brings to rebuild relationships and heal past wounds. Hey besties, we've come to the end of this story and I hope you enjoyed it as much as we enjoyed making it. I want you to share your lessons in the comment section so that others can learn from it too. And please, if you are yet to subscribe to my channel, don't skip this video without subscribing and turn on your notification bell so that you get notified whenever we post new stories. Thank you for all your love, your support and your kindness. I do not take it for granted, even just for 1 second. And right now, I'll have to go and see you in the next story. Bye!